Okay, folks, we are live here on Quantum Leap for Tuesday, February 16th, and it's actually just going to be Cory and I today. And we're going to talk about some interesting topics in business development. Sorry, I actually left the Y off your name, Cory, so multitasking. But welcome, Cory. And, we're fortunate to have such a great and knowledgeable business coach as part of this broadcast. And we're going to really touch on some of these issues that, for me, they've been huge. They've been life changing in terms of my ability to transfer out of politics into business and be successful in business. And I just know that they can do the same for others. And Cory is really a master of these concepts and, knows how to kind of work with people to unlock these. So I want to talk about some of these. And this is actually part of a new power partnership, one of our many strategic collaborations between Cory and I, where, the Quantum Leap video program and then the coaching that he does. And we have this such a synergy between what we both do. So with that, I just wanted to check in with you, Cory, and welcome you. And I look forward to talking about some of these terms. You have any opening comments about some of this stuff here before we get started?
Well, I'd say, so now I'm calling myself a visionary business coach, to stand out from the herd, as it were, because that's where I come from, is the bigger vision around things, which I know we're going to talk about today. And, I know there's a lot of visionaries out there. It's a big word for me to own, but at the same time, I believe it just means that, I always look towards the vision for things, and and I encourage my clients to do the same. They always have one. It's bringing it out and making that the basis for everything they do.
Yeah, and for me, it's essentially been like a MBA, working with you, and I don't think I've seen any of the business schools have somebody like you that is really basically academically so sharp, but also you combine the street knowledge, what I call it. So I don't know what they're teaching in business school these days, but I feel like learning on the fly with people like you to help is really kind of the most efficient way to really live these concepts. And that's what we're going to talk about. So things such as I don't know if you've done an MBA or you're familiar with
No, but when you interview Mike, ask him the question about entrepreneurial school, or the school for entrepreneurs. He has a great story about that. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. Yeah, Mike's going to be coming on the broadcast at some point soon. Mike Macedonia, folks may know him from BNI. We also got Don Lyons coming on as well. We're very excited to have them as some big name guests here. And we did just want to give you a little preview here. We have a number of these things that sound a little bit abstract, but these really hold the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, in terms of business success. Something called your why, the importance of your why, emotionally charged connection, your purpose, core values, and mission. So all these things kind of go together, and I really see them as core concepts. And these are things that I've actually been through 2 or 3 times. I'm really on my 2.5 or third time on each of these, to where you got to dig deeper on them and go over them routinely and to grow your business. So I don't know, Cory, if you could just give us a kind of a 10,000 foot overview of what these terms are and maybe why they're important to actually consider initially in terms of being a small business owner.
Yeah, so I there's a foundation to any business, and so in many ways, this is what I would call sort of the emotional, or you could call it spiritual, you could call it, it's whatever it is that resonates to the purpose of what we are doing, right? So these various parts, so it's we'll call it the why, which I think is an overused word these days. We can get into that. The vision, which may also be an overused word, but not enough. And and then there's the purpose or core values. There's various different ways to approach these things. I like to approach it from all angles, and sometimes it can be combined all into one. The mission, But you draw all those things together, and that serves as the foundation for the purpose of being in business, right? And what it is and who you're going to serve and how you're going to serve them is really what it comes down to, and what it's going to be the result.
Great. And I think kind of a practical anecdote where we see this in our business networking group, B&I, is, the 30-second elevator pitch. When you have these things in alignment, it really shows in, it might be a 30-second version of your story and what you do, or a 2-minute, or maybe it's a 10 or 15-minute keynote address. I really think that when you do this work, it really shows in how you present your business. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. Yeah. When somebody is connected to, their story, their purpose, their vision, and their mission, it really comes out and shows them as a strong, business person, member of the community, a leader. I mean, these are the things that we need to lead. And I can guarantee you that the great leaders that we know of use these tools, and however they approach it to inspire others and inspire others to action. And that's ultimately what we want to do, is inspire our customers to work with us, or our prospects to become our customers.
Great. I think the good place to start, maybe we kind of share a few anecdotes about our own experience and connection to some of these terms, is something called your why. And I think you really put this, have this down to a science about, what your why is and why it matters to business owners. Would you mind just talking a little bit about the significance of why, and maybe kind of what your why is, or what, somebody else's why is, and how to actually go
Yeah,
about figuring out what that is?
sure. And so the company I used to work with, they call it the emotionally charged connection, and you were using that term, and that's fine. They do own that term, so we don't train it that way. A lot of people are familiar with the why. Simon Sinek did a great book on Starts With Why, and there's a fantastic video called How Great Leaders Inspire Action, or you could just look up Simon Sinek Why, and it'll come up as well. It's a TED Talk. Um, and I love what he says in there, because the idea is that when people know that you believe what they believe, they will take up your cause and make it their own. So if you're looking to do something, a political cause, a world cause, or something like that, that is one way to, you've got to share that statement of belief. It's not about plans, it's not about ideas, it's about, this is what I believe. And those people who believe the same thing will come along. And it's the same with business, right? This is what I believe about videography, and what it can, not just what it can do for your business, right? Because I can give you a list of benefits all day long, or advantages and features, but it's really what I believe, or what you believe is the truth behind it. We heard from Shui a couple of weeks ago. I've always really admired her for doing the work on doing her why, which is around the story of her father and these two treasures she had, which is these two photographs. And so when she says how much she treasured the story that she made up behind those photographs, which turned out to be a true story for the most part, it inspires her to help others create their own treasures, right? So it's not just a photograph, it's not just a portrait to put on the wall, it is a treasured memory that she's helping people create and keep. And she believes that's what photography is, at least when she does work with her clients. And so that's so then you're going to attract people who say, wow, I believe that too. I want my photos to be my family treasures. So I know that this photographer believes that, I'm going to work with her, right? And they'll spend the money. Shui is not an inexpensive photographer by any means. She is definitely a great professional. And so it's the same, in my business. I happen to believe that people deserve their great vision, and I have my story behind that, and I can tell it in 30 seconds, I can tell it in 10 minutes, but ultimately it's the foundation. It's what drives people to connect with us. So I talk a lot about my struggles growing up. I was very alone. I didn't really connect well with other people. I had big dreams, but I had no idea how to to cause them, but instead I kind of, I was lonely. I struggled a lot, and there's a whole bunch of reasons behind it. So I won't get all into that, but ultimately I wound up in a bad crowd, and I really went the wrong direction, probably for the first 25 years of my life, and I felt like I could never get out of that. And then, I learned some tools to do that, and I learned these tools of putting together the vision to realize that those dreams can become reality if I write them down. I surround myself with the right people. I set the path and I start moving forward on it. And now it's happening, right? And that's what I do for others through my work, is to show people that they can also have those big dreams, no matter where they are in life. It's never too late to move on the path towards that big vision.
Great. And you actually have a exercise about kind of journaling to find out your why, where in your Lift platform, which is the platform that you run for entrepreneurs and small business owners, where you actually show people how you can just start journaling to kind of better flush out your why. And that's a process I've done a couple times now. And my personal why, or really the biggest challenge when I changed careers from politics, I say it took me 5 years to get out of it, um, was you have to change your identity. And to do that, you actually have to reconnect with the commonality between what I used to do and my purpose now. And that actually was really switching gears. And one of the things that you helped me find was that I got into politics because of essentially core values and to make a difference. But I realized that I could actually still be in business with those same core values and making a difference in business. It's just your vehicle is a little bit different, but also how your knowledge of what that is, and also how to communicate that to others. So I was a little bit long-winded, but we did. My why, I think, really is you know connected to a sense of justice. I realize people like Gandhi and um, Martin Luther King, I really look up to. That really, it's kind of your underlying purpose for your life. And I think I really like the justice part, to whereas I see just a lot of corruption out there and politicization of the business climate. And if we can be kind of honorable and just, I feel like that really gets rid of a lot of the problems that I kind of see out there in the world right now, and in politics, but it's also really spills over into business. So
Yeah, and so the two things you brought up there. So there's the journaling. Um, when we do this work with people, we tend to kind of open them up and get them a little raw. And anybody who's done personal development is kind of used to kind of what that looks like. But there's plenty of times I've worked with clients who've never done any of that kind of work. And so you're drawing them into a reminder of their history. And I'm going to tell you right now that it took me years to get from where I thought this was my story to what is actually my story. And because I just buried all of it. I mean, and just believed that I was doing something because it was kind of fun and I like puzzles. But my mentor said that's not it, and that's really not it. And when I did discover what it was, I actually had to change my career, because what I was doing wasn't fulfilling. It was great, it was good, well paying, and I still do it for for money and for fun, but I couldn't do it full time, that's for sure. And I could give most of it up. um, but so the journaling part comes in, where you start to open yourself up. And I encourage you, like anything you do where you hear something great, listen to that TED talk by Simon Sinek or Brene Brown's on vulnerability. And if this gets you thinking, that kind of juice is flowing, when you start to journal, it's because your mind is starting to bring up memories. And those memories are going to start to inform you of what it is that's really driving you forward. Or you just suppress them again and go back to doing what you were doing, which, you know, we all are pretty skilled at. Yeah, and then there's one other thing you mentioned, and now I forgot what it was.
when it comes back to you, let me know. I did want to say that you mentioned one thing that really, a lot of people, when they come into BNI, that they realize that they really like out of it, and that was education. So that's one thing that I really learned from Business Networking International, and our chapter here in North Oakland, the Abundant Referral Circle. So to really um, kind of discover what some of that stuff is. And I'm still kind of discovering. That's why I keep doing the work. And the more work I do there, the better I am at communicating that to clients. And there's something, I don't know if I actually learned this from you and Italina and other people in BNI who we see do it's called attraction marketing, where we use our why and our core values to attract our ideal client to us instead of going out and having to search them down. That's what I think about the why and the core values. Could you just talk a little bit about what that is and how you see this stuff tying into something called attraction marketing, or you may call it something different?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know a whole lot about attraction marketing. I guess, I worked in referral marketing for many years, helping people build their business relationships for referrals. And the, this all kind of went behind it. So I guess in many ways, we're helping people be attractive referral partners, right? By having these stories and these, this powerful connections that we're making through, who we are versus what our business is. And so does that answer your question in terms of that?
Yeah, I guess what I kind of have blended the two schools a little bit. I think, I
Okay,
guess
sure.
attraction marketing is a little bit more of the kind of flashy name for something that's maybe not quite as rooted in some of the stuff that you do. But I've kind of, I guess, learned both schools, so to speak. And I think that, core values and your why play such
Okay.
a huge part of that, if that makes sense. And
Yeah. So I look at it as core values. So the core values comes as more of, we're all pretty familiar with core values, but I think there's a real benefit to going through the process of discovering not only what your top 5 core values are for your business, but also how they really function within that business. And the core values that Gail and I put together for our business, for instance, those aren't necessarily our top 5 core values each, but it's what we feel the business represents in terms of how we live our values. And we might have a couple of others that we do in other parts of our life. So a good example, David, is your core value around justice, and how does that fit into your business, and does it drive something that you're doing within your business, or maybe it's a step away and there's something else within your business. But ultimately, when you have those core values, then who you're going to resonate with, right? My why will inform me to some extent of who I'm going to resonate with, but ultimately, it's some of our core values, like mine is like adventure. It is about curiosity. It's about walking the talk. And if those aren't in alignment with the people as our clients, we start to see conflict, right? If the people don't really fit that, then they just aren't a good fit for us, right? They may be a good fit for somebody else, but some people are not terribly curious. And if they're not willing to be challenged on, their thinking, then it's not going to be a good fit. So they may say, "Oh, I heard you're a great business coach," and I'm like, "Well, okay, are you willing to get curious with me?" And they say, "I don't think so." Then it's not a good fit, and that's happened. I know lots of great business coaches who don't need that. They'll hold them accountable and help them with goals and things like that. And then there's other parts of it. Again, we use a little more adventure and so on. So I encourage people to do a sort of just an inventory of core values, write down what it means to them, and then kind of work to figure out what those top ones are. And it's a process. It's not something that has to be done all at once. I think the first time I did this, somebody gave me a core values worksheet, and I actually wrote a paragraph on what every one of them meant to me. And then I kind of sorted out really the actual words that made sense to me. And actually, David, justice is one of mine as well. So I may actually have a slightly different view of it than you do. I'm sure we could come together somewhere on that.
yeah, no, great. And
That's maybe why we get along so well.
yeah, no, and I actually discovered that on the second time around. The first time around, I had a different set of values because I was still kind of figuring out my
Sure.
top values. But when I did that again, and that was one of the things that being left off once I'd done some more work, wanted me to make sure and go back and look at that. And we are going to have Italina on in a couple of weeks. She can kind of explain how some of this means to what this means to her and some of that school too. But I really see it in terms of, role models are so powerful in business, people in BNI that we look up to in terms of how they conduct business and the role that their purpose and their values tie into their business. And that's something I found so fascinating about business now that I have a framework to understand it is given to me by you and Gail and some of the other people that we're in close contact with in terms of BNI.
It's interesting. I think, we're all kind of familiar with the business world and so on. And I think one of the great things about BNI, and it's not just the people in it, but the effect that it's actually had on the way people do business. Because of the realization that, we have to come from our values to actually attract people into, it's, there's a lot of world out there that just think everybody's after profit, but it's really, in the small business world, we're out to reflect our values and, and draw people to that and create our business communities around that. And I think BNI and organizations like that have helped people recognize, that's the way to operate. When in business school and everything else, it's usually more about the numbers and things like that. So that's I think one of the great values of these business organizations that put values first above the money.
Yeah, no, I've had kind of an epiphany recently with that, where every time I look at the BNI internet, the national BNI network core values, I realize how critical those are to the community. And I think where corporations and bigger business gets in trouble is that they're not grounded in their core values. They're saying that there's something else than they actually are. So it's kind of getting disconnected from some of these core values. You see that in politics as well, where people who say what they are, they're actually something totally different. So, I think that's what I really love about small business, and this kind of, we can be who we say we are, so to
Right.
speak. And that is what is such an attractive quality about working with people in BNI, when they have these values that they share. For example, giver's gain is probably the foundation of BNI, and I don't really see that kind of practiced out in the corporate world, except to kind of look like it's giver's gain. It's not really necessarily, it's kind of a more doggy dog world in that corporate environment with the cartelization and this ultra competitive nature of multinationals and corporations. But I think I do see still an importance there in core values, and that the most successful companies, to be successful over the long term, they still have to be connected to some of these key values. And I don't know if you have any any follow up on that in terms of how core values might apply to bigger corporations versus like small business.
Well, one of the things, and I don't have any corporate background. I think one thing that makes me unique as a coach is I don't have a corporate background. I don't come from that kind of thinking. But I do have a little bit of experience, working. Well, I worked for a corporation that got pretty large, but back when it was 25, 30 people, maybe it was 100, 150 by the time I left, before it became thousands and thousands, and then got bought out by another major corporation. But early on I did some corporate engineering, which I always found fascinating, and but I've always been with small businesses, and some had great values and some didn't. And I'd say the ones that had either strong values or sort of the strong family feeling are the ones that usually do best, right? They're sort of like, our customers are our family. I mean, that is one of those kinds of businesses you see out there that do well. In the produce industry, that was really common to run into. But as far as the big corporations go, one of the things I looked into for a while doing was alliance management. So I thought, well, as a referral marketing specialist, we could also do alliance management. And so if you look into, that is one area where, these people doing alliance management between, so it's corporate business partners, right? Like, you might see in technology where two are coming together to kind of service, different areas of their verticals and things like that. And I could get all technical on that. But so the alliances is where they have to start actually coming together on core values. Like, if you're, A&A, computers, and the other one is, B&B graphics, and, they're like recommending each other. They're working together more closely. And so that's the alliance management. So they have to come together on those core values. And having talked to some of those people, that can be a real struggle, because anywhere, there's disconnect between those values, it tends to create conflict. And like you said, a lot of times in corporations, the bigger it gets, the harder it is for them to stay connected to that. Weird Al did a fantastic video on mission statements, which I feel is a good parody of sort of this idea of we're just going to throw a bunch of words in our mission statement because they sound good, and it's hilarious to watch. But I am a firm believer in a good mission statement. I think it should reflect core values and what a person does. But it's great for a small business, but when you get so big, the mission is not really a driver anymore.
Yeah,
Tell you what it is. Anyway.
yeah, I think there has been a certain amount of polarization and fragmentation in our culture. I mean, you see it even among the big multinationals based here in the US about these feuds and increasing battles between, Apple or I think it was Apple and Facebook, Tim Cook and, Zuckerberg, they don't see eye to eye. And then Elon Musk is trashing other people. So, I think there's a real kind of a more free for all. And I think, some of this political divisiveness is also really carried over into the corporate, culture. So they kind of drive each other.
I think there's a certain point where, sometimes, especially for public companies and so on, they have to, they have a fiduciary responsibility to create, profit. I don't want to say profit, but to create, shareholder value, which usually comes in, good profit margins, maintaining good profit margins. And so ultimately that's getting as many customers as possible to part with as much money as possible over the long term, right? Short-term profits aren't really what they're after so much as that long-term shareholder value. And so on the one hand, having a good mission statement and vision and sort of crafting that will create some of that value, and it will draw some people to you, but ultimately it may not be enough. And so they have to, create something that's more generic and widespread. And so they can start clashing with all kinds of different directions, right? We see that in Facebook, and we see, because there's so many different people using Facebook, their values can be very different than the people, the company itself, and they've lost that control. We as small businesses, we have that control, especially as solo business owners. I don't want to do business with people who don't have my core values. And I'm not saying they're wrong to not have them. They're just different than mine. We're going to clash because, my enjoyment and their enjoyment would be from different things.
Yeah, I think of back in the Union Pacific Railroad, what would the values have been of, Union Pacific Railroad? That one columnist compared it to the octopus, so when you have all these tentacles everywhere, you have maybe some values over here that you're showing that, so it's kind of like these companies are so massive that, there's not much that ties them all together except, it's almost an empire in itself. So
yeah, so then you might look to the unit that you're dealing with, or if it's a food label, what's the original food label? But yeah, there's again, they buy a food label and then they, move it off to, offshore, and then you lose the quality of it, but they're still kind of playing on the original value of it. So it undermines their brand, but that's, so I think branding is, we small businesses can brand, but this is everything we're talking about is part of the brand that we create for ourselves, right? So you may not have a great logo or a great name. I do happen to love Take Wing Coaching. But ultimately it might just be you, it's me, Cory Nott, it's David Kirsten's, wide angle media. What does that mean? So that brand is your your why, your vision, your core values, your mission, and tying that all up into something that you act through, right? That becomes the brand. It's you. Whereas a business, they just, go behind, big business, they just go behind the logo and the commercials, right? They sell you on the music. What was that thing they were showing where, pretty much all the COVID commercials were exactly the same? I don't know if you've seen that lineup, but from all the big corporations, it's like, we're all in this together, and they pretty much, it's the same music and same lines. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost meaningless in some ways.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I did want to just end, and I like the discussion here, but I did want to kind of tie it just to end to tie this back a little bit, in that if somebody is, watching this and this is, they want to revisit some of these issues, could you just tell us a little bit about your process for getting people started and say this, kind of the package that we're offering now, real either through, Take Wing or just to get started in, a Quantum Leap kind of
Sure,
program.
I'll throw it as an example of what David's doing. So if you were to hire David to be your videographer for, saying, doing a video blog, you want to do a series, you want to do a show, you want to do a podcast or something like that. And some people, they have all that content in them. They're ready to go and they can produce, the next 200 podcasts, no problem. And I always admire those people, but they're not as common as we might think. They're just the ones who show up you know, in that way. So, but there's a lot of us out there who feel like we have a story, something to share, and but we don't know. We might know where to get started, but we don't know how to continue. What's the middle part? What's the content? How do we keep rolling that through week after week after week, so that we build an audience and we, share that message and we get an opportunity to, to brand ourselves that way. So you would hire somebody like David to be, to help with that podcast, that blogcast, the video blog, whatever it is you're doing. And David would say, okay, so, what is your content going to look like? And that's where he's like, I'm not sure what it's all going to be. I've got 5 weeks sketched out or 15 weeks sketched out. And David would rightly say, so 15 weeks is just going to put you on the edge of maybe some people starting to pay attention. So, what's going to be 50 weeks or 100 weeks in? And so that's where I can help, because when we set the process for me to get started on a thing like that is to start saying, okay, what is my vision for it? What is going to be the outcome? What do I really want people to get from this thing? And what do I want to get from this thing? What's the ripple effect? There's so many steps. So the process is really to start to create that. There's also the why, which is, the reason for doing that. Rather, and it's not just building the brand, but there's usually something else behind it. What you feel that true message is, the belief behind it. And then we get into the mission, who it's serving. We can get into the core values, the purpose, and so on. So the process is really to create the story behind the message, so that you never really run out of content, because you're always confident about what it is you have to share, that the right audience is going to be listening to you.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this, and it could really be as little as 1 2 hour session to draw this out, and then we can take that content and go up on video and have something, a lot more powerful than maybe if we didn't do that work. Because when you kind of strike these core chords in your past or your core values and you flush that out, when you go up on video, that's a powerful thing. So, we're really just trying to kind of encourage folks to take another look at some of these things, because once you figure that out, you can basically put that right up on your website. You can go write a video script with it, and it's just amazing how great that, it's kind of gold nuggets of content, so to speak. So
Yeah.
well, good. We'll leave it there for today. Thanks everyone for joining us on Quantum Leap, and we'll be revisiting some of these issues. I know we didn't quite get to everything in good detail, but people can get started right now by signing up for Lyft. You can really get access to that first module on creating a strategic business plan, where you go into your why, your core values, your purpose. So it's all videos and, self-driven. Then you have office hours and even, coaching sessions with Cory and Gail Knott. So do check that out if you haven't yet, or get in touch with Cory or I, and we can get you started too.
Yeah, it's very reasonably priced right now too. So you get a lot for your $40 a month.
Great. Yeah, we'll put the links in the comments, and with that, we'll close it out here on this edition of Quantum Leap Live. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, David.